And Mouse just died.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Sunday Pub. If anyone's there, I am sorry I screwed up. I clicked the wrong thing, or I misclicked, and I set this stream up for 7 instead of 8. So some of you, Thornall, Miss Moody, Jerome, you were already here an hour ago. And I wasn't. Sorry about that. I could have sworn that I set it up for 8, but I screwed up. How is everybody? Britton has already joined me. How are you doing, Britton?
I'm doing pretty good. I started a new class for summer this upcoming week.
All right. What was that?
This last week, and it's something.
All right. Madison's here. Good to see you, Madison.
Isn't that the reclusive booktuber?
Jerone's here. Is she reclusive? I don't think she's reclusive. She just has a life.
Ah.
She hasn't been putting out videos for a while, but then neither have I. So I can not blame anybody for that. Daniel's here. DK's here. Good to see you all. The regulars. Especially good to see you, Madison. Haven't seen you in a long time. Madison was part of, I did a series of live chats with her and Derry and Evie on each of the series from Realm of the Underling. So we did a Farseer chat and we did a live ships chat, and we're due to do a 20-man chat. I'm basically doing them as I reread them. Raph is also here because medal's over, I guess.
Raph, motherfucking blue text. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Cheers.
Oh yeah.
Brian's here. Rogue's here. What's the crack, man?
Yeah.
Jared's here. Madison's had a break for a year. I didn't realize it was a year. Yeah, that's been a while. Would be good to see your lovely face on the booktubes.
Yeah, get the posse together. We got the whole posse here.
The posse.
Okay.
Brian says Madison should rebrand and shoot from a cave.
But only if she does shadow plays.
I was going to say, yeah. If you're gonna do anything in a cave, it has to be shadows on a wall.
The good old Terry Pratchett jokes like "do deformed rabbit." It's my favorite.
Yes.
I still need to get the guards. I don't know when I'm going to get to that.
I just finished last weekend. I finished Men at Arms.
Men at Arms is so good.
Men at Arms is very
really
good.
Good though. Can you show that again? That copy looks that's a really good design.
There's a really nice series of these, which are hardback with a bookmark ribbon and a sort of a smallish format for a hardback. They're kind of trade paperback format, kind of. And the weird thing is
they're fairly cheap, aren't they?
They're really affordable. In many cases, they are cheaper than the paperback version that I can get. So I have now, I think, bought the entire City Watch series in these formats, and they're really nice. And I just finished Men at Arms, which was awesome.
I love it. It's my current bedtime read because I've read it so many times. I could probably recite parts by heart at this point.
Okay, like do the deformed rabbit.
Yeah, right. That's in there as well. Like it's
exactly.
in a couple of Pratchett books, but it's in this one as well.
Yes. Grumpy Smurf's here. Good to see you. Yeah, Men at Arms was Brian's book of the month for April. Yeah, it's really good. I mean, I wasn't surprised because this is Pratchett, but it was first of all, I don't laugh out loud. I don't emote about books that much.
You just have that stone face when you're reading.
I just read
old stone face, as they call it.
And whatever is happening internally. and people talk about crying, like literally crying in books. I never cry when I read a book.
Yeah,
I'll be moved. I might be choked up or something, but I never cry reading a book. And I never laugh. Men at Arms, I laughed out loud more than any book I've ever read. I just couldn't help myself. He's so witty, but then combine that with he's taking on racism, sexism, and gun violence in a big way all throughout the book. And so it's a hilarious book that makes you think.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what makes Men at Arms better than Guards is that he gets the balance between those two things more right than he did with Guards in a way.
Yeah,
and you can see that, like, which is why I always say that people should read it in publication order, because you can see him grow as a person and see Discworld grow and change with Pratchett as the author, which is a really interesting, unique experience with him.
Yeah, Madison, having 5 kids is having a life. That's exactly what I meant.
5 kids. Wow.
Yeah.
It's like my aunt who lives across the street from me.
She's a busy lady. So yeah, no, she's got things to do other than making videos, which is completely understandable.
I mean, look at us. We don't have lives, and we still don't make that many videos. I mean,
I don't make any videos at all, and I have absolutely no life, which is strangely enough part of the reason probably I'm not making any videos. But Bex is here, Aaron's here, Dan's here. Good to see you, Dan.
Dan. I love you, Dan.
Claw is here. I don't know who that is. I don't know if this is the first time in the pub or if I just don't recognize your name. But welcome, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Good to see you all. How was your medal, Raph? For those of you who don't know, Raph hasn't been in the pub for a few weeks because medal.
So not only metal, but mostly metal. First I was hiking with a bunch of friends. We are all fans of like the same metal band, and they are currently on break because the guitar player had her child, I don't know, a month ago, 2 months ago. And since we're kind of friends and so forth, we just like went to like their home region, just went for some hiking and met with some of the musicians in the evening at the bar and like at the pub, because it's, Upper Bavaria, which has like a lot, not Upper Bavaria, the Upper Palatinate, which has a lot of like really good bars. So we did that. And then the next weekend I went hiking and to a metal concert. And then I went over the Pentecost weekend, I went to the Rock Hard Festival, which ends on Sunday because Pentecost Monday is, of course, a public holiday in Germany. And so I came back on Monday, like, I don't know, late at night. And then I had Tuesday and Wednesday to, breathe. And on Thursday in the morning, we went to the next festival. And then I came back on Sunday, but late Sunday last weekend. And this week I've tried to sort of keep a low profile before I head into the next disaster.
So when you're hiking...
Yeah.
I'm assuming you've got your hand on someone's shoulder or something.
It really depends. Like if you're in a group, it's not exactly that necessary. And the problem is, like, of course, that when you're hiking through, say, like the forest or whatever, the typical stick that blind people use is not of that much help because.
Yeah, exactly. I imagine being out in the wilderness. I mean, there's a path, but like the stick isn't going to be as like informative as it is in a city where things are clearly defined, I would think.
Yeah. Well, usually it's more like if you're in a group, it's more like you walk beside someone, you talk. It kind of works out most of the time.
You can sort of orient yourself by staying close to someone.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. For those of you who don't know, Raph is blind, and I am.
He tries to hide it.
Yeah, I don't let him. No, I'm just a very curious person, and Raph and I know each other a bit, and I know he doesn't mind. So I ask him all of these questions like, what the fuck is it like being blind? That kind of thing. So Evie.
So is it like black all the time when you look around?
No. I can see light and dark. I can see light and dark and sometimes like shapes or movement if it's really close to my eyes and stuff like that.
So you're not like 100% completely blind.
No, it's not yet.
Okay. Oh, but it is degrading.
Oh yeah, it's very much degrading. That's kind
Okay.
of the point. And
Okay.
you never quite know how far it will degrade, I guess.
Right. Okay.
Evie, you're red. A little bit.
Yes, because I spent 2 days in a row riding outside when it's super hot out. So,
Which sounds fun, but leaves you with a sunburn
indeed.
when
You
you're a
would think
pasty white
that
person.
I'm incredibly white. So, you would think I would learn how to use sunscreen. Nope.
Nah,
Yeah.
not at your age.
I grew up in Australia and I had my one I can't lay on my back for like 3 days straight sunburn.
Oh yeah, I had that too
And-
once. It was bad.
And after that, you're just like, I'm an idiot. I'm never doing that way again. I was snorkeling and I had sunscreen on, but if you're in the water, you have to put it on every hour basically. And I was so fascinated with the fish and the coral that I was face down in the water for like 3 hours. And couldn't sleep on my back.
Yeah, I had the same thing. We were like when I was still rowing, we went to like sort of as a trip with like the rowing team to like a lake, and we had like afternoon off and didn't do anything, but we had like a bunch of surfboards lying around, so we just like paddled around on the surfboards, and I fell asleep on that surfboard on the lake. And so yeah, exactly the same thing. It's like, because water is really bad because it also reflects the sunlight even more.
It reflects and it washes your sunscreen off. So it's just like so stupid. It's always funny in Australia. I used to kind of regularly there would be a Buddhist tour kind of, and there'd be people come over from Europe to Australia to travel around Australia in a group. And they always wanted to go to the beach, of course, because it's what you do in Australia. And we'd go to the beach and all of the Australians would be over there in the shade, and all of the Germans would be lying out on towels.
Of course we do.
And then that evening, all of the Australians would be comfortable and enjoying themselves, and all of the Germans would be unable to sit or lay down or do anything because they just bright red burned. Because the Australian sun is not the sun of Europe. Like
especially not the German sun.
Not the German sun. Even Spain, where Germans like to take holidays, like the Australian sun is considerably harsher than anywhere in Europe. So,
Well, it's
like
because the ozone is thinner, right?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, America. It's really, really serious.
I've heard you. Oh, never mind. You were
What have you
talking
heard?
about Australia. I was going to ask you something about Australia.
Yeah, if you lay down in the sun for half an hour in Australia, it's like 2 hours in Spain. It's really, really aggressive. It's crazy.
Dan, wasn't it only 40 years in the desert though?
Dan doesn't know. He wasn't there.
You sure about that?
Rogue is from Ireland. He's unaware of sun.
That makes sense.
Totally understandable. Yeah, exactly. Tennis players in the Australian Open get sunstroke all the time.
I got sunstroke once. It's not fun.
I've had really serious sunstroke in Australia. I walked around Ayers Rock, the big rock in the middle out in the desert that you see pictures of. And when I started the walk, it was like 28 degrees, which is comfortable. When I ended the walk, it was 45 degrees. So, and
that's comfortable.
I thought it might take 2 hours to walk around. It took 4.
Whoops.
And yeah, so the last 2 hours was like 45 degrees. We didn't have enough water. I didn't have a good hat. And my girlfriend and I got in the car and turned the air conditioning on and literally passed out, like total blank out. Woke up with the air conditioning blaring like 2 hours later. Yeah, I think that is actually what brown skin is for, Shad. It's sun protection of a sort. Yeah, exactly, Ida. Vicious burning face in the sky. We hates it. Yes, although I actually love it, but I am Australian enough, and my stepfather has had enough melanomas burned off of his skin, or is it carcinoma? that
It's melanoma, but I'm not quite sure.
It's melanoma. I'm pretty sure melanoma is the skin. Yeah.
It is.
I've learned to be cautious.
Yeah, my grandfather gets like cancerous bits off his head because he's always like, put your sunscreen on when we're out swimming.
Yep.
I'm like, yeah, I know.
And wear a hat.
Yeah.
Yeah, my stepdad is a guy who back in the day built 2 houses with his own hands. He's one of these kind of old school do anything kind of guys, and he's also a big gardener. So he spent way too much time when he was younger outside without a hat, without long sleeves, without enough sunscreen. And
That kind of person doesn't let like a little sun get in their way, does it?
exactly. What kind of pussy do you think I am? Yeah, exactly.
Unrelated to the sun, Matt, how far into Boy's Life are you now?
Evie and I, if you missed last weekend where we did the Fireside TBR surprise,
Yeah.
Josh picked Boy's Life for me to read, and then I picked Boy's Life for Evie to read. So we're reading it together. I am 228 pages in. I think I'm in chapter 6 of part 2.
Wanted to read that book for a very
So I'm
long time.
a bit ahead of you.
It was
It's
quite a bit ahead of me. I am just starting part 1, chapter 7. Part 1, chapter 7.
chapter 7.
Is
yeah.
this something I might actually enjoy? Because I've avoided it for the usual reason that people that I really, really, really dislike love it, and I'm like, I don't trust you.
I mean,
Do you
it's-
dislike them because they like the book? Or
No. I dislike them first. It's the kind of thing where
Okay.
I'm like, I distrust those kind of people's taste in books in general. Even when
mean-
they like books that I like, I feel they like them for the wrong reasons. So I'm like, is this something
Right.
I might actually,
So, from everything that I've heard about it, do you like the coming of age aspect of it?
I
you
have
don't.
not read it because I really, really don't like Stephen King.
Oh, okay. Cool. Never
I
mind.
think-
Boy's Life,
think-
Boy's
I
Life
think
so
it-
far
Yeah.
is reminding me a lot of Stephen King.
Okay.
So maybe that's a reason to not like it. It's also
I also am. I'm not going to say that I hate Stephen King, but his writing generally does not work for me. But Robert,
Yeah, because he's shit at writing. He has good ideas for stories, but he's like outside of The Gunslinger, which is the one time Stephen King actually tried to do stylistically something. Outside of that, he just like puts sentences down. It's like, yeah, you can tell me that story. You don't have to write it down if that's all you do with words, man.
I mean, to be
disagree
fair,
with
that is what you do with writing: is you put words down.
Yeah, but you can
No.
do it in like an interesting way, or you can just like do it in the Stephen King way.
Yeah, and it's a stylistic choice to not be stylistic. But
But-
back to Boy's Life,
Which I
Back to
don't
Boy's
like. Yeah, back to Boy's Life.
So it is a man recounting his
childhood.
life as a kid and
Okay.
the happenings that happen.
How
Um,
incredibly American is it? Because that's like the other thing that I have issues with.
That's
when
what
it
I
comes
was going to
Stephen
say.
King.
Actually, it's very
very Alabama, very
it's very
southern.
nostalgia for
Yes.
small southern towns in the mid '60s.
Yeah, that sounds like that's
America.
because that's like the other
It's
thing that I
very
really
American.
find annoying with Stephen King is like a lot of people seem to latch onto that sort of nostalgia for like mid-century US small town stuff, and I'm like, I'm not from there. I don't fucking care about
course.
all of that.
Of course.
So you're like the Michael Moorcock to Stephen King's J.R. Tolkien here. Is
No.
that
Of
what you're
course not.
saying?
But I think Stephen King is the person who wished he could have written Our Lady of Darkness by Fritz Lieber, and who wished he could have written Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. That's Stephen King to me.
Okay,
I
'Cause
do
that's
love-
what he
I do
used to
love
write
something.
after.
I'll just leave that right there. The,
Wait, so how do you
um,
like Something
for-
Wicked This Way
for
Comes? That's a
me-
bunch of small town nostalgia.
Something Wicked This Way Comes, I like because I really, really like the authorial voice of Ray Bradbury, whether he's like nostalgic or he's humorous, as in his like Martian Chronicles. I like I like reading the words that Ray Bradbury puts on pages. I don't like the words that Stephen King puts on pages, except for The Gunslinger, which I like the very overt like biblical language. That kind of works for me.
Yeah,
fine.
I don't know if the pro style would work for you. That's kind of hard to say.
Yeah.
It's I find it's doing interesting things, also specifically with the language and the style,
Okay.
because a lot of what it's about is kind of how the world is more magical when you're a child, right? How
Hmm.
you perceive things as more strange, but the strange is normal to you, and that we get sort of educated
Mhm.
out of that. There's a quote at the beginning which is very
I was gonna do a dramatic reading. If you would
but
like.
just quickly and a lot of what he's doing with the language
Mhm.
sort of pushes that idea.
Yeah.
The language is obviously very consciously, because it's told from the perspective of a man
Of the
looking
adult.
back to when he was
Mhm.
10 or 11,
Yeah.
and he's telling it as an 11-year-old. And there are particular scenes in it where you're like, did that really happen, or is this like a kid's imagination, or maybe a bit of both, or whatever? And I find that really interesting what he's doing with that. So
Ida, why?
anyway,
Ida, why
um,
do you say that I have said that I haven't started Curse of the Mistwraith? I haven't even said anything about what I've read the last month, I think.
exactly. We're like Raf is not talking about Boy's Life because he's reading it. Evie and I are reading it. We'll get to what Raf's reading in a minute. But first,
Yeah.
a dramatic reading
Yes.
from our
So the
very
qu-
own Evie.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so the quote that Matt was talking about, this is literally like the in-text preface to like note or whatever before the story starts. So, see, this is my opinion. We all start knowing magic. We are born with whirlwinds, forest fires, and comets inside us. We are born able to sing to birds and read the clouds and see our destiny in grains of sand. But then we get the magic educated right out of our souls. We get it churched out, spanked out, washed out, and combed out. We get put on the straight and narrow and told to be responsible, told to act our age, told to grow up for God's sakes. For God's sake. And you know why we were told that? Because the people doing the telling were afraid of our wildness and youth, and because the magic we knew made them ashamed and sad of what they'd allowed to wither in themselves. And then further on he goes, I need the memory of magic if I'm ever going to conjure magic again.
Okay.
Actually, it just occurs to me, Raf, one of the things you might actually be interested in the book
Okay.
is it's set in the mid 60s, right? I think the first year in the book is 64.
Okay.
And that was the time where Americans, some few Americans, were starting to realize that being racist wasn't a good thing. And
Oh, really? Oh.
it's a small town in Alabama, so most of the people there have
No
not
one
really
was
gotten that
racist there,
point yet.
I suspect.
No, it would. Well, you couldn't identify in a racist because it was like normal. And like many small towns in America, one I lived in,
Mhm.
the black people live over there, and the white
Yeah.
people live over here. And that is an issue in the book that he's very clearly bringing up and
Okay.
investigating. And it's that part of it is interesting.
Okay.
Might be
That does
something
sound
you'd like.
interesting. And I have to
Yeah.
say, like the quote that Evie just read already sounds much more interesting than anything of King's I've read beyond The Gunslinger. Like just from like the style.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the King comparisons come from the fact that it's a
Small USA in the 60s.
it's nostalgic USA in the 60s in a small town. It's coming of age. It's a lot of slice of life.
And they were writing around the same time. They were both horror writers
Yeah.
starting off, and
Yeah. I think like what I find so fascinating with King, with like later King stuff, like for example that atrocious Kennedy assassination book, which is really really bad.
That's one
like
of my favorites of
which-
this book,
which
Raph.
everybody but
Wow.
you loves.
hell?
Like everybody.
Okay, let me explain what I find so fascinating is when you compare the Gunslinger. There's like in the Gunslinger, spoilers for the Gunslinger. There are these like flashes into when they switch to the boy whose name I've already forgotten because who cares, life in New York. And that part is really well done, and it's all about like how fucked up New York is, and how uncaring it is, and how racist it is, and how sexist it is, and all of that is in there. All that anger is in that old Stephen King book. And then you go and read the 11 whatever, whenever whoever killed Kennedy kind of thing happens, and suddenly like small towns in the US, like the US are a much better time in the 60s. Like, what happened to you, King? Can you please go back on cocaine so you can write actually angry books again? It's so frustrating because he got it the first time round, and now he's like completely sort of erasing that with like newer stuff and all that small town nostalgia.
Anita, you're absolutely right. You can't guilt trip me. However, Anita, you could start reading Boy's Life right now. Evie is only 6 chapters in. I'm a bit further because I started before her.
Anita hasn't even started, like, she DNF'd Eyes of the Void, so she's not starting Boy's Life. So,
all right.
I can't believe that I'm going to be basically defending Stephen King. But
I'm the guy who usually defends Stephen King.
He can't believe it either.
You can be critical. Well, one, people grow over time, but also you can be critical and negative about something while also being nostalgic about it.
Okay, so the main thing I found problematic with the Kennedy book that everyone loves is that there are a bunch of editing errors in there that could have been taken out if someone actually had the balls to stand up to Stephen King and go like, hey, you need to change this. There's like cars changing colors in the road between like 2 scenes and stuff like that. And I'm like, that is frustrating to me because this is not like a self-published, never edited thing. This is like Stephen fucking King we're talking about. This is like millions were spent on advertising this thing, and someone doesn't care.
When I read The Stand, I got the re-unabridged version where he put back in all of the stuff that his editor took out like 20 years before or whatever. And when I was reading it, there were a couple of bits where I was like, this feels like a bit that your editor probably took out.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure you should have put it back in.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem.
I think he's so big now.
Mm-hmm.
And he's such a name, and he's so successful. You'd have to have pretty big balls as an editor to tell him this bit you wrote here is wrong. Let's take it out. You know.
Yeah, and I think that's something. I'm always wondering if that's something that is actually holding back the magical winds of winter, because George R. Martin is also way too big to actually listen to his publishers or editors going like, "Hey, George, cut it out, man." I wonder if that's like a similar situation.
He hasn't called me and told me any inside gossip on why he hasn't finished that book, but
Maybe we should ask Brian.
I just imagine, like, first of all, you already semi-wrote the end through working on the series.
Yeah.
And it didn't go very well. Like, most, like, hardcore fans of the show are like 6 really good seasons of television. And I imagine coming out of that, the pressure. I mean, I'm not Gurm, obviously. I don't have any experience even halfway similar to his, but I just imagine the pressure and the confusion of it, like separating. Maybe I'm going to do something totally different for the book, and I don't know.
I think the other part is like something that I've always thought about George R. Martin is like the guy wrote all kinds of different stuff over the years. Like he's been, and I think he's just bored with Game of Thrones. And I think that's like one thing that kind of keeps him back from it, or keeps him from kind of blasting through it like he did with like the first 3 books when he was like super excited about it. Now I think he's had enough. He wants to do something else. And he's certainly doing like more wild card stuff.
He's
and all this
also
other stuff.
Old.
Yeah,
you know, like at his age, I don't think I'd want to take on a huge book project and be rushed and have a deadline and everything.
Yeah, definitely.
Either,
but I think it's one of those things that we often underestimate with like writers. I mean, I think with like Steven Erikson and Cam Asselman, it kind of works because they've been in that specific world like 20 years before they even started writing books, basically. But Martin just made that up after having written, you know, a vampire horror novel set on a steamboat, and you know,
Which I still want to read.
stuff.
I've got that.
It's really good.
Got that on my shelf.
It's really good. He's done all this other stuff, and I feel like he's someone whose mind kind of wanders from project to project, and I think he just doesn't feel Seven Kingdoms anymore. He's done with Westeros in his brain, but he has to kind of go back.
The real Song of Ice and Fire expert has corrected me. He didn't write the end of the series. He gave them 3 points, and only one of them actually made it into the season. So yeah, and I mean he has been bouncing around all the time. It's not like, you know, it's not like he's doing nothing. Even at his age, he's still not doing nothing. He's doing a lot of stuff.
No, exactly.
He's just not writing so much on
the
book everyone's waiting for.
Yeah, I just think he doesn't feel it at the moment, and which is fine. I mean, I don't blame him for it. I would have been fed up with like doing Westeros like a long time ago at this point.
Aaron's here.
Authors do not owe readers anything, no matter.
No,
what.
exactly.
So
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I don't know what kind of deal he made with his publisher, because there might be something of owing his publisher something. If he makes a deal for like, I write 5 books set in Westeros, then he has to write 5 books, which he did. If he said like, I write 7 books set in Westeros, then his publisher might have like a claim there, because that's a different thing, right?
The thing with contracts, like us normal people, we think of contracts as legally binding promises, which they are not. You can pay your way out of any contract anytime.
Yeah,
and I'm sure Gurm has got enough if it really came down to that. But
yeah, definitely.
You know, he hasn't said he's given up. You know, it's not like you know, I'm not writing any more Westeros.
No, I think he's still working on it. I have more trust in Winds of Winter coming out in like the next 3 years compared to the Doors of Stone coming out in the next 3 to 5 years, I think.
Unrelated, because I will forget. Well, yeah, whatever.
Just
Matt,
say
I
it.
love your shirt.
My June.
Yes.
Thank you. I love your Frick as well.
Good old Michael Nip merch.
Yeah, right, Jimmy. I like his short stuff as well. I even think like the Duncan Egg novellas are really cool and fun. And
Duncan Egg was fun. Yeah,
I would have loved to have like a Duncan Egg show instead of like House of the Dragons. I would have loved to have like a serialized kind of thing.
Are they doing a Duncan Egg?
Well, we're getting it.
They are doing a Duncan Egg show, as far as
Do I
I
look
remember
like someone who
hearing.
pays attention to television?
Sure.
Which I've also wanted a Duncan Egg, because it's like his Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. I really enjoy those stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can see the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser thing slightly there.
It's not as horn doggy as as Fafhrd.
No,
that is true. But
there
it also
isn't any
looks
weird
like-
shit with women in Duncan Egg. There's plenty of it in Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser.
To be fair, though, I feel like most of the women in Fafhrd and Grey Mouser have a lot more agency than a lot of women in later epic fantasy.
Yeah, I'd really have to think about it, because I read I think all of the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser stories, but a long time ago, when I was a teenager and stupid. And I recently reread the first Swords Against Deviltry, which is actually just a collection of short stories, and with Tori. And
it didn't go well, I know.
It went really badly for her. And for me, also being maybe less stupid than I was, and certainly more aware of treating women better, I found the portrayal of the women, like you said, they had a lot more agency than a lot of old school fantasy women.
Yeah.
No question. But
I think it also really depends on which part. Like I think like the Unholy Grail, the whatever what's his name, Mouse's girlfriend there, she's terrible. She's also like very poorly written. Whereas the one in the Snow Women, I think, is better in part, at least. And once you have Ilmet and Lankmar, it's really bad because they're only there for like, I don't know, two scenes to be before they get like absolutely fridged in like a horrific way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what Jerome is saying. The second collection has almost no love interest because Fafhrd and Mouser are both traumatized. That's because their love interests get fridged, like very unceremoniously fridged.
To be
very
fair,
early
though,
on.
compared to some other situations, they get fridged, yes, but it's very clear from the beginning that it's actually the fault of Fafhrd and Mouser because they do like the dumb drunken thing and break into the thieves guild, and that's why the whole thing happens. It's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't come out of the blue. It's very much them doing like a dumb thing.
It's a
because they're
result
drunk,
of their stupidity. Yeah.
which is still better than some fridgings I've encountered. But yeah,
Of course. Yeah.
So y'all might have already talked about this, but what are you reading? I know Matt and I talked about Boy's Life.
I'm
but
reading Boy's Life. You know that.
I am still getting through Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Hello there. And I'm about to start, and I blame StoryTube for this. So if they watch this, it's your fault. The Power of the Dog.
Nice.
It's Stranger and Norrell.
You're full of shit, man.
Oh, yeah.
I've been reading a lot of weird shit over the last weeks. I read the
No, you've been reading weird shit, Raph?
So
How is that possible?
I don't know. I finished the I'm Afraid You've Got Dragons book by Peter S. Spiegel, which I absolutely loved and highly recommend. It's so much fun. It's really cool.
I ordered a copy of A Fine and Private Place, by the way.
Hmm?
I ordered a copy of A Fine and Private Place. Or Fine
That's
Private
such
Place.
a magical book. I love that one too.
Based on your recommendation.
Yeah.
I would like it. So.
Yeah. I did read Cahokia Jazz by Francis Spufford, which I personally really, really loved. It's very much like alternate history detective story in the same way that Yiddish Policeman's Union by Michael Chabon is one. But this one is set in the fictitious city of Cahokia, which has survived into the 1920s and is still ruled by one specific native tribe that I can't remember right now. That is supposed to be, the people that actually inhabited Cahokia before it, was destroyed and everything. And you have like that's a murder happening. And you have police detectives like trying to figure out what's going on. And there's different the whole like 1920s hard-boiled detective story set in that alternate history, which is extremely well done. Like Francis Spufford can write books like incredibly well, is my point. And I'm sure this one will win a few prizes here and there. It only came out like last November or something. So I read that, and then I reread A Secular Age by Charles Taylor because I like to torture myself with academic philosophy and history of philosophy, and that's like a 900-page or like 42-hour audiobook of exactly that. And then I got mad at at not Dan Simmons, in this case at Dan Brown fans telling me that Dan Brown's book are not pernicious in their effects. And then I got mad and was like, I'm going to do like a quick video about this, which means I obviously started reading a couple thousand pages on and around stuff. So I read The Holy Grail, The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, which is the book that the Da Vinci Code is kind of taking its entire premise from. And the authors of The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail sued Dan Brown back in the early 2000s about it, but because theirs is supposedly a non-fiction book, they can't actually sue fiction authors for taking ideas from non-fiction books. It's a terrible book. It also quotes the Protocols of the Elders of Zion as one of its sources, as a positive source. And now you see why I have maybe issues with Dan Brown.
I was about to say, I'm looking forward to your Dan Brown rant. I can't stand Dan Brown's work.
It goes way deeper.
I thought it was cool when I was like 13, but
yeah.
Then I read the Da Vinci Code a long time ago, and I thought it's kind of a thriller page turner, and I don't know enough about any of the weird conspiracy shit to have any kind of thoughts on it.
See, here's the thing. I know enough about it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I like a guy like you would take the book very differently than I did like 20 years ago.
Yeah, and then I reread the Illuminatus trilogy by Robert Shea and Robert Anton Wilson, which is still absolutely fucking amazing. And I wish more people would read it, but I also fear that most people would really, really hate it.
I read those back in university, and I agree with you. I actually really enjoyed them, but I think a lot of people would hate them.
They're absolutely fantastic. they also have like the best take on the JFK assassination that I've ever read.
I don't remember nearly enough about it.
I think they have like 5 or 6 people who claim that they've killed Kennedy, and it's never made clear who actually did it, which is really funny. So I reread that because, you know, that also ties into my Dan Brown video that will eventually come. And then I read the last 2 days, Friday and Saturday, I read High Weirdness by Eric Davis, which is a nonfiction book looking at the psychedelic experiences and the psychedelic and 60s counterculture influences on Terence McKenna, of course, Robert Anton Wilson, and Philip K. Dick, and how that counterculture influenced them and how their writing in return influenced like the counterculture in the 70s. And that was a very interesting book.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah. It's really good if you're into that. He's a scholar of religion, so it very much looks at like the spiritual aspects of psychedelic experiences. That was really interesting. And today I reread In Ascension by Martin McInnes because I finally want to make that video that I made in January, and then I decided to re-record it, and then life happened, so I haven't re-recorded it. And I figured like after 4 months I should probably reread it before I record a video on it.
You know, Raph, you were talking about the JFK thing and Robert Anton Wilson stuff. That reminds me of From Hell from Alan Moore. There's a little bit at the end where he's basically just taking the piss out of ripperology. It's just people running into planks, basically just illustrating how pointless it is.
Yeah, I think the important part with the Illuminatus trilogy is that a lot of it is based on the whole Discordian Operation Mindfuck stuff that people like Kerry Thornley did. And Kerry Thornley, as a proto-anarchist and a very problematic figure in his own right, was in the same Marine unit as Lee Harvey Oswald and was a friend of Lee Harvey Oswald's in the late 50s.
Wow,
He actually testified before the Warren Commission. He actually was a suspect in the JFK assassination, and he still fucked around with claiming the Bavarian Illuminati assassinated Kennedy and stuff like that. It's one of those weird things where reality, or what passed for reality at the time, intersects with all kinds of weird fiction in unexpected and terrifying ways, and that's one of the things that I want to look at with that prospective video, which is looking at how, say, situationist and proto-anarchist kind of attempts of shattering the spectacle or shattering consensus reality kind of opened a space where stuff like the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail could actually reach a mainstream audience, and that allows them, later on arouse people like Dan Brown to get away with what they do with stuff like the Da Vinci Code, and sort of making that very specific form of a conspiracy or conspiratorial thinking part of reality, which leads to all kinds of painful places in our world right now. I mean, I don't have to tell you about that. So that's kind of what I want to do. Which
I do hate to defend Dan Brown here because I don't really think his work is all that good. But I don't think he was. I think he was more with the Da Vinci Code. Was like, wouldn't this be cool if this were real? I don't think he was trying to be like, ooh, not no. He's run the world,
But here's the point. What Dan Brown does is he takes one non-fiction conspiracy theory book that very much is anti-Semitic, even quotes the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. He takes that thing and makes a novel around it with action professors doing solving puzzles in front of like highly cinematic tourist destinations in Europe that every American knows, which gives him obviously a movie deal within like minutes, basically, and spreads that whole thing to everyone. And he plays it straight. He plays it completely straight, and that I think is at least very, very that's dangerous. Because he has read the book. He knows that thing is anti-Semitic. He just goes like, well, if I don't mention the Jews, I guess it's no longer anti-Semitic, is it? Right? No, it's still the thing. And that's the problem there. Anyway, there's more to it. Yeah, I'm reading Hofstadter Paranoid Style in American Politics and stuff like that to kind of tie into it as well. So it's one of those, like, I want to make a 20-minute angry video, and then I realize I have like 2,000 pages of research material.
Why don't we, with that, have a sprint until 1:15? Good with everyone? Yeah.
That's half an hour. Sounds Sounds good.
And I'm probably gonna
Cool.
put in some pizza, so I'll be right back.
Don't forget to mute yourselves. Hello. How was the reading?
It
I
was
read-
fun.
I think I have like 5 pages left in this chapter. So,
Chapter 7 now, yeah?
the lady.
It's a banger.
Yeah.
That was it took me a little while with Boy's Life to kind of figure out what it was going to be. And because there were
Feels
certainly
very episodic in a way.
yeah, but there in the beginning, like the first sort of 5 chapters, there's sort of hints or slight feelings of maybe weirdness, supernaturalness, but is it only the kid, like the imagination of a kid, or is it more real? And chapter 6 and 7, I was like, oh, okay, so it goes that far. It's cool. It's a good book. I'm really enjoying it.
Sounds good. I read 3 chapters in The Morning of the Magicians.
The Morning of the Magicians.
Yes, by Jacques Bergier and Louis Poel. And it's a weird book. It's a really weird book. It's 2 French journalists doing basically what Charles Ford did, but for like the 1950s. It's sort of like where all of the Nazi ancient astronauts, whatever occultism conspiracies kind of get collected for the first time, and it has a huge impact on like 1960s counterculture. You see why I'm reading, in this case, rereading it, because I read it like years ago for other reasons.
What are you reading, Brian? You just started chapter 3, and Kindle tells you it'll be a 50-minute chapter.
Damn!
He's reading The Vanished Birds, and I was just getting ready to message him, but I'll just tell him now. Brian, there are 12 chapters in total in the entire 400-page book. So,
okay.
Very long chapters, but there are natural page breaks.
I just started Power of the Dog, but then I got pizzas, so I got kind of derailed. But I'll get back to it if we do another sprint.
I know dogs, and pizza is very much a part of their power, or it gives them power. I can tell you that.
You better like it, Brian.
Hi, Alicia.
It's very striking. I don't know if any of you guys have ever read James Ellroy, but it reminds me of, though it's not quite as extreme as he can be.
I don't think Raph was speaking French. He was pronouncing a couple of French authors' names.
Yes, my French is very much broken. I don't speak French. I learned it at school and then promptly forgot all about it.
Yeah, I learned a little French. I actually learned German in school. That was the main language I took. And by the time I moved to Germany, I didn't know any of it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the school thing, right? It's like I learned French and English in school, and then I forgot all about it, and then I had to reconstruct my English, and I'm slowly getting there, but,
Even if you... Like, this is one of the tragedies of, like, anyone in America having languages in school, is if you don't then travel and use them, you may as well have not bothered taking languages at all.
Exactly.
It's just gone. I took Latin in high school, so that was actually helpful with English.
I took Latin as I had to do English and French, and then I could take Latin as like a bonus language. It was like a really clever idea because yes, I hated it during high school because other people had could go home and do stuff, and I still had to go through Latin. But then I had like the Latin qualification that other people that tried to study philosophy and history had to do at university. And trust me, it's much harder at university than the one that I got at school.
My English comprehension, or whatever when you take the SATs, the really big test at the end of high school in America, which is kind of a qualifying test for getting into universities, you do a test SAT, and I took a couple of years of Latin after my test SAT, and my English portion of the SAT went up by like 200.
Oh.
And I attribute it primarily to Latin, because if you learn something in Latin and then you see a weird word in English that you completely don't know, but you know the Latin roots, you can kind of figure out a good
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, and Latin kind of gives you the way we learn Latin, and like the way we then try to do Latin exams and whatnot at school, right? It's like it forces you to always go like, what could this possibly mean? Let me try to figure out. It forces you to do like weird etymology in your head and kind of go through that. And it's a skill that you can apply to all kinds of other languages, like Roman languages or languages with like a Roman influence. You can always use that.
I wanted to. Everyone's been talking a lot about Jenny Wirtz lately, and I wanted to recommend this. That Way Lies Camelot, which is a collection of her short stories, because it's interesting. The only thing I've ever heard anyone talk about is Jenny Wirtz's fantasy, and the second short story is science fiction.
Okay, nice.
Which sort of surprised me. I mean, there's no reason not to think that she doesn't also write science fiction.
I can't. I don't think that one is available in audio, and I'll try to not talk about Jenny Wirtz, because otherwise I'll have to answer Ida's question about having read Curse of the Mistwraith, and I don't want to answer that one yet.
Okay. I've only read 2 stories. I actually haven't even finished the second story yet.
Okay.
But
Okay.
So far good. Her prose, which everybody loves so much, is good, no question. But sometimes it feels unnecessarily complicated. It forces me to read slower than I might otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the whole like prose style thing is, it really depends. I can't even define it, right? Like, there's stuff where I'm going like, well, this is incredibly over the top, like your average Gene Wolfe book, right? And I'm like, this is very much deliberately over the top, and I really enjoy it. And then there's stuff that is similarly over the top, and I'm like, this feels wrong. And then there's stuff that is like super sparse, and I'm like, your Cormac McCarthy, and I'm like, yeah, that works as well for what it's doing. I think it's often sort of like that mismatch between what, like the style and the subject, and there's subjects where that fits, and there's subjects where that doesn't fit. Like for example, like the Ada Palmer stuff, the Terra Ignota, it's also incredibly over the top, but it tries to do like the Baroque thing, and I've read original like Baroque texts, and I'm like, yeah, this is appropriate for what she's doing there.
Yeah.
It feels very Baroque.
Ida says that actually Wars of Light and Shadow does have science fiction stuff in it as well as fantasy. I did not know that. Tori just arrived. Hello, Tori. Thank you for your help last weekend. It was Tori who secretly shuffled our lists of books that were then surprise chosen for us. A very difficult job. The check is in the mail, Tori. Thank you for your help. Yeah, it's a different frequency, Ida says. Yeah, it's just one of the, I think it's just one of those things of getting used to it. Like when I started reading The Spear Cuts Through Water, I was like, I think this is going to take me a really long time. And once I got a bit into it, I got kind of
She's very proud.
Is that the UK edition?
Yes.
Yeah. I think it is. I
it.
recognize the the typography is totally different. Nice. Yeah. No. When I started reading that, I was like, "This is going to be really slow," and then it's something about the structure and the prose style that I kind of got used to, and then it just sort of flowed. And I assume it's kind of the same with Jenny Wirtz. Although I have read To Ride Hell's Chasm. I did read that whole thing.
Tori, don't be concerned about To Like the Lightning.
No.
Do the same thing you do with Malazan. Try not to understand every single thing in the beginning, because that will drive you to madness. Just go with the flow and see where it goes.
You know, I saw Jenny Wirtz
had
done a blurb for Tori's book yesterday, and I'm like, damn, that's a really evocative blurb. Hopefully her books are as good as that blurb.
They're horrible. They're garbage.
Yeah.
No,
Are you
I mean,
talking about Janie Wirtz's books or Tori's
I
books?
think
Jenny
Tori-
Wirtz.
Tori-
Not blurb.
But
okay,
but-
you meant Jenny Wirtz's books. I was
but-
talking about Tori's books.
but I do want to read.
You can always
I am
just go
I am
with
hoping to
proof.
read Phased this October for my Spookathon read.
Phased is the one I'm a little nervous about because the author herself, when I said, "Oh, we're friends," and I'm curious, so I'll buy your book. That was the only one that was out there at the time, and she said, "You won't like it,"
Got
which may be
werewolves, so
true.
I'm gonna love
Which
it.
may be true. So I'm perfectly happy to have given Tori a little of my money and have it on my shelf. But I really liked the Bloodstones. As
I'm
I've
sure
said
some of
before.
you, I know Matt is aware of this, but I accidentally bought Return of Edan to Edan instead of
Way
Prophet
of
of
Edan?
Edan the other day.
Oh,
So that
it's-
was pretty embarrassing.
It's a trilogy. So
also-
if you want to read the trilogy, you need the third book as
That's
well.
true.
So just
I'm
get
trying
the
to look.
second
I'm
book
trying
in
to
your
look on the
stack.
bright side here that I have it now, so I don't have to worry about it later. But you know, it's like, oh,
Okay, she said she wasn't sure if I'll like it, and we'll see. I probably will read it.
do you like werewolves, Matt?
I don't have anything against werewolves. I am an equal opportunity reader.
All right.
Vampires, ghouls, werewolves,
Mhm.
they're all welcome in my books.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I'm glad you liked To Like the Lightning. It's a wonderful book. The whole series is amazing.
I still need
will-
to finish it. I haven't read what's the last
perhaps
one?
the stars.
Perhaps the Stars, yeah.
I will return to them. I'll do like a proper like series of videos about it. I thought about maybe doing like an introductory video with like looking at the general idea of the Enlightenment with a couple of like reading tips if people want to actually get background knowledge with, because I feel like for reasons I am qualified to do that because I have read a lot of stuff about the early Enlightenment, about the radical Enlightenment, and I've read a lot of the authors that she quotes there, and I'm like, maybe I should do like here's stuff you might want to read if you feel like reading To Like the Lightning and understanding more than
I
More.
think you are well qualified for that, and it's one of those books. I mean, I go back and forth. It depends on the book, it depends on the author, but I go back and forth on being annoyed by references that are obviously there that I don't get, or not caring. And in Terra Ignota, there were obviously a lot of things she was working in that I was not fully educated enough to pick up, but it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me because the story around it was so good, and the world that she was building was so interesting, and yeah, it just didn't get my nerves.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like people like you and me who have come through the absolute pressure gate of reading Book of the New Sun have gotten used to the idea that we can enjoy a book without getting all the references, because no one ever will get all the references in Book of the New Sun.
Well, I mean, except Max Garfield. Mac has become famous in my mind anyway. For sending lists of references. Like, he's been reading Sun Eater and and posting references on the Fireside Discord, and it's just like they're like these 2-meter long posts.
Yeah,
with
no,
every reference he picked up in it. Which actually, I don't care. You're like, those details don't interest me that much, but I'm impressed.
Yeah,
somebody
that
that
was like
finds
one
all
of the
that.
things I realized when I reread Illuminatus this time around, because between me reading it for the last time and reading it this time around, I finally read Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, and there's a lot of James Joyce references in Illuminatus that I completely didn't pick up on the
That
last time
doesn't
around,
surprise me. Yeah,
because like,
That's
why would
actually-
I?
I had in late high school, early university, I had a sort of conspiracy
Mhm.
novel phase, and I read the Illuminati books, and I read some Thomas Pynchon,
Yeah,
and I kind of noped out on Gravity's Rainbow because
I love that
Gr-
one.
yeah, it's interesting story, but like that was one where I just constantly was feeling like I'm not nearly smart enough or educated enough for this book.
Yeah.
Like there is a lot of
Yeah.
reference going on there, and
Mhm.
some of the references to mathematics, which is even worse than
Yeah.
like philosophy or history or anything for me personally.
Yeah,
Because
and there's even like Illuminatus has like the Pynchon references as well, which I the one when
Yeah.
they're reading like one of the notes is like, does Pynchon know? And then like two memos later, we're only using the Tristero secret postal network, and I'm like, you fuckers.
No, I do hear that Gravity's Rainbow is about how how they figure out how to what is it? They figure out when V2 rockets are going to strike from a guy's erections. So I mean, can you
That's
confirm or deny
one
this?
very small part of it. There's a lot of other things going on in Gravity's Rainbow.
there's a
I
lot
like
going on. in
Evie's
Gravity's
reaction. It's
Rainbow.
like, what the fuck is what the fuck's he talking about?
Tyrone Slothrop, who gets an erection whenever a V2 rocket comes down. Yes, but there's all kinds of other stuff. There's like this immortal light bulb,
I
which
mean,
has
to be
like
fair, who doesn't get an erection when a V2 rocket comes down? So
Maybe Cormac
yeah,
McCarthy.
true.
I don't know.
You probably.
Looking at the fact that like say, for the last 50, 70 years, no V2 rockets have gone down anywhere, I'm astonished we're still around as a species. Just
Correction.
saying.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think like Thomas Pynchon is a very interesting author in that he deals with like the same kind of things that stuff like Illuminatus deals with, that a lot of like the collapse of the 1960s counterculture into like the paranoid 70s is very much like the Pynchon thing, but because mostly he deals with it from distance in hindsight in a lot of cases. It is different from, say, Illuminatus, which is very much part of it and is very much an activist text. Like Illuminatus sets out to, create cognitive dissonance. That's the goal. You're supposed to go out after reading that book and being different. And Pynchon kind of more looks at it from like a more melancholy kind of hindsight. It's like, we had this chance to create a better world and we kind of blew it, and now we're stuck in this whatever this is kind of thing.
I think of because I've only read Inherent Vice from Pynchon, but I see that he's very holistic. Like everything is connected as far as the eye can see. No, I mean, if you want to confirm or deny that, that's fine. But that's the vibe I've gotten from his work.
Yeah. I mean, like the thing is, like I've learned, like with especially authors like Pynchon, like Umberto Eco, like Illuminatus as well. It's like the older I get, and the more stuff I've read, the more weird stuff I've read throughout, like both history and different academic subjects and whatnot. The more references I get, and that gives me that warm, fuzzy feeling that I'm smart, which I enjoy.
Sure, of course. Of course. I mean, the first time I read Book of the New Sun, I got a lot less than I did when I reread it last year.
Yeah.
And he's also, Gene Wolfe is also an author where you feel like patting yourself a bit on the back when you get stuff, because it's not all that gettable.
Yeah, and but I think in a lot of ways, I think it's interesting for me to see how these things connect. And I've reached a point, especially with the current stuff that I'm reading right now, is like I've reached a point where a lot of the stuff that I've learned and studied and just read as fiction over the years all kind of flows together. I've reached this weird synchronicity moment where when I read that, Holy Blood and Holy Grail, which is just bullshit conspiracy theory, is like, but
what's it called?
The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. It's by 3 British journalists, and it's about the idea that there is this sacred bloodline that is, protected by the secret society, and the premise for Da Vinci Code. And the thing is, I studied 12th and 11th and 12th and 13th century heresy law, canon law at university, and I studied Merovingian history and all these other things. I read that book and I'm like,
who knew that those
wrong.
things would actually end up being useful?
Yeah, I know, and I read these books and suddenly I notice these things, and there's that moment when what's it called? In both Illuminatus and in Holy Blood and Holy Grail, they all repeat that whole thing that when Louis XVII, whatever the guy was at the French Revolution, gets beheaded, then the guy in the audience goes like, Jacques de Molay, you are avenged. And I know which source that is. And I know which source that is because Norman Coon quotes it in his Warrant for Genocide, which is a history of the protocols of the Elders of Zion. And that's sort of where we get that source from. And it's like, all the stuff suddenly collapsing, and that's the scary part, is that I realize I'm at that moment where it is very much possible to fall into conspiracy theory because I can't
everything's
connect all these
connected.
things. Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, it's not connected. It's just that, like, for all kinds of weird and stupid reasons, I ended up studying a lot of stuff that very much connects in this specific area, but that's just like dumb luck. But I can see the attraction.
It also makes it more difficult to talk to normal people because we have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's the other part. Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's all right. We're used to it. Every time we talk, I feel like I learn something, or at least I hear something that I didn't know. I probably don't follow up on it and go deep enough in it to actually learn anything, but I do hear a lot of things I didn't know. Yeah, exactly. Raph knows all the interesting things.
Yeah,
I feel like I know most of the uninteresting things, but I can maybe make them interesting, sound interesting.
Well, I mean, like all of these weird things that you read and know, they are interesting. I don't know if they're important.
No, they're not.
Or in any way relevant to my life, but they're interesting. You know, no question.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the danger, right? It's like that the stuff you know assumes importance in your worldview just because you know them. It's like,
sure,
there's stuff about like biology I know nothing about it, and because I know nothing about it, it doesn't feel important to me. I'm aware of the fact when I sit back that that's stupid, right? It's like, you know, Freemason conspiracy theories are not as important as understanding biology. I'm aware of that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think most of the things that you could understand about biology are also relatively abstract.
Yeah.
And not directly practically applicable to your life. Yeah, some are obviously, but like not necessarily all. I was reading earlier today. I was reading a nonfiction book, which is out of character for me.
Okay.
Which is a neuroscience book about depression and how to reverse it.
Okay.
Called The Upward Spiral. Which so far is interesting.
Okay.
It's basically taking there's sort of a standard symptom list of major depression or major depressive syndrome or whatever it's called. And it's basically taking each of those symptoms one by one, breaking down how it's connected to a particular aspect of neuroscience and how you can then through proven neuroscience influence the neuroscience of depression to reverse it, which sounds interesting and maybe also even practical. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's true. I was going to say that sounds helpful.
Yeah.
And see, that's the
not
interesting
just
part.
Interesting.
It's what people like Michel Foucault would call like a technology of the self, which is kind of what ties back to the whole like psychedelic thing that I read yesterday and the day before, because that's exactly what Philip K. Dick did a lot of his like later years. He was self-diagnosing his various mental illnesses and self-medicating and doing all kinds of stuff. But of course, he hadn't read The Upward Spiral because it wasn't written back then, so he just took speed instead, which may or may not have helped.
Thornall, if you are being serious, you are wrong. That's all I have to say about that. No, Chadia, not influence with chemicals, influence with behavior. Because all of yes, influence with chemicals, but the chemicals are happening in your brain naturally. So there's all sorts of serotonin, dopamine, and all those kinds of chemicals that happen in your brain, and they're all provoked or kicked off or introduced into your brain through your behavior and your experiences. So it's much more about changing your experiences, changing your habits, changing the things you do, doing some things you may not be doing, stopping doing things that you are doing, to influence the chemicals in your brain, basically.
See, the problem there, Thornall, is that if we all have what's best in life, we'd all be crushing our enemies and see them driven before us and hear the lamentation of their women. And
Yeah.
if all of us do that, there's a bit of a problem because
You have
we
to
might
have,
run out of-
And
we
Stephen
might
King
run out
wouldn't
of
be
enemies.
publishing books. There you go.
yeah, you have to have,
You
You
guys
have to
stop
have
with the Stephen King.
somebody.
You're really making it bad.
you have
Somebody
to
has
have
to be crushed.
somebody that you can crush, and you have to have some women that are lamenting. Otherwise, somebody can't have what's best in
Yeah.
life. We can't all have what's best in life.
You know, speaking of nonfiction books that Matt was on about, I was bitching on Twitter the other day, as you do, about how everyone seems to be like, "Oh no, AI," and I'm like, "Am I the only one who's actually like interested in what AI will be?" And here comes Matt out of nowhere. He's like, "Oh, here's this book I read about AI. You gotta check it out, buddy. You'll love it."
Oh,
So you-
damn.
you-
Might scare the
Here's-
hell out of you though.
Here's the
Read,
thing.
read
Nah.
Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom. Oh my god. It's really, really interesting.
And I was like, "Oh man, okay, yeah."
I mean, it kind of depends how you define AI, right? I did talk about stuff that I randomly know. It's like my thesis in computer science, because I actually did a thesis in computer science, right, was on artificial neural networks and clustering algorithms and the idea of like emergent properties and stuff like that. So I do maybe know a bit about it.
Nick Bostrom
Yeah.
is a philosophy professor at Oxford.
Yeah,
He spends the first quarter of the book defining what he means.
yeah,
Like he really breaks it down super clear, even for not
Mhm.
very smart people like me.
yeah,
He breaks it down very clearly, very simply into what are we talking about if we're talking about conscious AI? What are we talking about if we're talking about AI at all? What's the difference between AI and expert systems? Blah blah blah.
yeah, yeah. That makes
And then he
sense.
goes into, because he's a philosophy professor. He's not like an AI researcher or something.
Yeah.
He started getting interested and maybe, I guess, concerned about AI, and he decided to write this book. So he went out and he found, I don't know what it was, 500 of the leading experts on AI in the world, and interviewed them all,
Yeah,
and got so many different interesting perspectives, and he breaks down all of the different ways that people are trying to create AIs. So brain simulation and neural networks and whatever, and machine learning, and he goes into all these different things before he really gets into the what could this mean, where could this go,
yeah.
that
I mean,
kind of thing.
I feel like right now the main danger is not so much that we create like a super intelligence, because we haven't even figured out what consciousness is in humans. So it's more like maybe we'll accidentally stumble into creating a conscious AI, but we won't be able to do that on purpose because we haven't figured out what consciousness is in humans. That's sort of like where I think the main danger for me lies more in that people figure out, like, grossly overestimate the powers of current large language models and associated sort of lowercase AI programs, and will use them to do really dumb things to just further ruin the planet. That's sort of where I see the main danger right now. It's far more likely that we'll just, like, use ChatGPT and associate different, that kind of program to do something really stupid that will, hurt a lot of people, than that we'll accidentally invent Skynet. I think the danger is far more like an economic danger than it is currently an AI, a scientific danger.
Yeah, and I think, to vastly oversimplify, I think his biggest, or his scariest risk in the book was that we would develop not a fully conscious superintelligence, but a very capable, very mechanical intelligence that's extremely limited, but that would have too much power to do things. And that it would then follow. I mean, it like, we can't define morals or anything clearly enough for us to really have control of something like that.
We can't define it because we can't even agree on it as people.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like whose morals are they going to be? And the other thing that's really kind of terrifying in the book, and I need to look it up again, because he mentions a science fiction book which apparently illustrates this idea really well. He said that the purely talking about speed, like speed of calculating things, speed
Yeah.
of making decisions, speed of absorbing information. He
Yeah.
said, like, comparing an AI that could exist in the next 20 years to any human is like comparing a human to an ant.
Yeah.
Like, just as far as the speed at which it can do things, make decisions, execute commands, whatever. And when it gets to that point, yeah, it's a really interesting book. It's a really,
Yeah,
really interesting book.
Yeah, I think what's interesting with like AI, and that's one of the reasons that kind of got me back into like getting angry at Dan Simmons like 2 years ago, was the way he phrased like the whole Hyperion thing is all about like humanity versus the AI core, and to compare that with the way that William Gibson phrases that problem in the Sprawl trilogy, which is basically about the same kind of thing, but with Simmons, it's like, the AI will be smarter than us humans, and they will use us humans, and then they'll just like kill us because AI is fundamentally evil. And which is like, if we created AI and you assume that they will be evil, what does that say about humanity if that's the kind of thing we create? And he never answers that
Right
question
back.
because he's a terrible anti-Semite asshole. But William Gibson goes the other way around. It's like the whole plot of Neuromancer is about an AI trying to get out of like human control. And once it's out of control, it just like goes somewhere else and does its own thing and goes like, hell, it's a wide galaxy out there. I want to find stuff, and we'll work together afterwards because there's no coercion anymore. So why would we? And I think that is an important difference in like the framing, that a lot of like AI discourse is like, if we create Skynet, it will kill us humans because that's what we humans would do. And I'm like,
that's one of Bostrom's big points, which he drives home throughout the book, is maybe the scariest thing about it is when an AI, and he basically says it's inevitable, just a question of when an AI gets to that point, maybe the scariest thing is that we don't know what it's going to do. It's an alien intelligence. It will be like no intelligence we have ever encountered ever in the history of mankind. So like, we don't know if it'll be what we think of as evil. We don't know if it'll try and help us. We don't know if it will just seal itself off in the corner of the internet and philosophize forever or whatever. Like, we have no way of knowing what it would be doing. It will just be a really crazy, powerful intelligence that can do almost anything at once. And we have no way of predicting what that might be.
Yeah, I see that fear of the completely unknown. I totally get that, especially since we live in like in a paradigm, in the scientific paradigm, where the whole goal is for us as humans to figure out where all the levers in the universe are so that we can push them.
Ida says we can just turn it off, which is the very beginning of I don't understand anything about AI and what might happen with it.
Well, I mean, technically we can, I guess. It just comes with like a very high cost, like everything else.
Been really, really, really careful with everything to do with that AI and how you set it up, and you didn't connect it to the internet ever. There's a really, really good, I wish I could find it. I'll see if I can find it. There's a really good short film which was done by, I don't know, I think it was a film student or something. And it's very simple, but it's basically a lab where a small team, startup kind of thing, are developing an AI. And it starts off with they're just teaching it how to understand language, which already exists. And then the AI, and this, I mean, parts of this are quite unrealistic to start with, but the AI achieves a certain kind of level of intelligence where it suggests to them that it would be more efficient if they gave it a voice interface, that it could actually talk and other people could talk to it. And it grows in intelligence and it learns and it grows and it learns. And one night, and they've been really, really careful to isolate it. It exists only on one mainframe kind of computer. It's not connected to anything external. It's air gapped, everything. And one night, one of the programmers is there very late because he has no girlfriend. He has no family. He's kind of a lonely nerd. And the AI starts talking to him and
Yeah.
explains to him all of the wonderful things it could do for him if he just connected it for a minute. And of course, once he connects it for a minute, everything's over.
Yeah. Well, either you're
Yeah.
right. The apocalypse will happen no matter what, because we're certainly fucking up our planet at a speed that may prevent us from actually, reaching a conscious AI, just because we're, Which brings me back to, if you haven't read it yet, read In Ascension by Martin McInnes. It's a really, really good book about, climate change and life on Earth and how it may have evolved and how not, and how we repeat like the sins of our fathers or mothers or whatever. It's a really powerful book.
Is it a fiction novel?
It is.
Or
It is science fiction, literary fiction / science fiction. It was on the long list for the Booker Prize last year.
Ida, you're like, every time you say something, I just think you don't know very much about AI. Everything online, like online isn't just the web. It's not just I'm looking at web pages and that's everything that's online. Everything in the entire world is connected to the internet now. It's becoming more and more and more. Like there are very few factories in the West, at least, that don't work through a connection to online. So if something lives online as its native habitat, it can manipulate so many things in the physical world without any challenge at all. So yeah, I mean, AI won't change anything real is absolutely untrue. It already has.
Ida really just
changing people's behavior.
Ida's really on the just like, we're all fucked, we're all gonna die, just
But that's like
fuck
even
everything.
but that's the point. Like even beyond that, right? It's like people are using ChatGPT right now to put people out of their jobs, to exert way more pressure on people, to reduce their wages, and so forth and so forth. It
Exactly.
has real effects right now, whether you want to or not. That's the fucked up part. That's kind of where it's already dangerous. It's like it's
unfortunately
another
real.
tool. It's another tool to just hurt humans in the name of capital, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean the visual AIs are not that different. I know illustrators that aren't getting clients anymore because clients can pull up a image generating AI and say, I want a picture like this, and it'll show them 100 options. So yeah, it's already changing things in the real world. No question about that. And
I guess my gripe would be, is it really AI? Because it's still just a machine that's
I think that's part
operating
of
a function.
Well, I mean, I think people conflate AI with automation, and
Look, the
like
main
this-
thing, Rick, is that AI won't have to pay hush money to porn stars.
hey, ayo.
true.
Yeah, well, it won't
True.
do that.
That could be an upgrade.
Well, he said AI might replace the government. What an AI president would be like. It's like that's like the first thing that I recognize will change to the better.
Better than numerous presidents we've already had.
Yeah, that's
Probably.
easy.
There's got
Yeah, no,
Merkel.
you're
They can
right,
do
Evie.
that.
I mean, like there's it used to be like at the beginning of even the concept of AI. It used to be when people talked about AI, they really meant artificial intelligence, like something that was intelligent, something that was conscious in some way. And it's just become the catch-all for anything that has some sort of learning-ish
Capability,
behavior.
Yeah.
Like Chat
Um,
GPT is not AI. That's just
Well, it's
machine
what
learning,
people it is AI in the way people use the term now, but it's not intelligent.
and, right. Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
conscious in any
Which
way.
is what, yeah, the conscious stuff we call like general AI, when we have like, it
Yeah.
can do anything. And it's like, no. That's, yeah.
ChatGPT is an expert system with a hell of a lot of machine learning built in.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not full on like a conscious mind.
Yeah,
kind
it's
of
not
AI.
like it's not like it's not like Shodan from System Shock. If anyone's ever played that, it's not
It's-
like
It's very impressive in what it can do, and it can replace a lot of people doing what David Graeber would call bullshit jobs. And we need
Yeah.
to figure out what to do with that, because maybe we don't need those jobs to begin with, but maybe we should find out what to do with all the people that don't need to work anymore. But that's
Yeah. And I mean the idea of AI has always kind of been neighbor to the idea of universal income.
Yeah.
For that reason. But it doesn't we're working a lot harder on the AI idea than we are on the universal income idea.
but how?
Yeah, and that's kind
Why
of
is Ida so obsessed with trees?
yeah. And
I'm not be obsessed with trees, to be honest.
Trees are pretty cool.
Trees are awesome.
Trees are the
Yeah.
reason that
As-
we can breathe and have oxygen.
and as Thornall said, fear the last march of the Ents.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the things, like stuff like universal basic income or whatever. We need to figure out what to do with that, but and it's right now it's like more an ideological question that kind of keeps us from the idea to give people money for not working. And yeah,
Exactly. But I mean, I don't see any reason that it couldn't happen.
No,
I don't have those ideological ideas. I mean,
Yeah.
I read the Culture a long time ago and
yeah, exactly.
twice. So I'm like, sure, could be kind of fun.
I'm
Kinda
all
do what
for
you want.
I'm all for that very specific post scarcity, fully automated luxury communism in space.
That's post scarcity, fully automated communism in space. Yes.
Yeah, we'll see how long that lasts.
Yeah. I mean, if you believe in banks, hundreds of years,
Thousands of years.
thousands of years, longer than
Well,
our
that's-
culture has existed.
But I mean, the key point there, Britain, is that it's a post scarcity society that means, like, as long as we have unlimited resources, there's no reason to not do that. The main
Yeah.
thing that we're dealing with right now is scarcity. Sometimes it's artificial scarcity, but other parts of scarcity are unfortunately very real. And
Yeah. And we still need people to do certain things which create things that are
Yes.
scarce.
Well, well, when I think of like post scarcity, I think of like Star Trek,
yeah, that's the
No
same kind of
money.
idea.
Yeah.
and all that fun stuff.
Just if you take it to the logical conclusion that AI is actually running everything and taking care of humanity, then you also don't need the Federation and you
Yeah.
don't need Starfleet.
Yeah.
Like, Starfleet doesn't make any sense in Ian M. Banks's culture universe.
Although, like,
Um,
to be fair, like, a lot of like the culture stuff is about those people that don't want to just live in like idleness, but
There
actually
are
feel
some
that weird drive to.
few people that still have a job. kind
Yeah,
of.
and that they join contact or special circumstances, because there's people that will be unhappy with just like changing sex every couple of years and just fucking around in space, which I don't understand, but
So, how about another sprint?
that sounds good.
Another half an hour until past.
Let's do it.
What time?
past.
Half past. Okay, another half hour. Sounds good.
Yeah, exactly.
I may drop. Aaron and I are trying to figure out dinner, so
Unacceptable.
Food is
Shame
for
on you.
amateurs.
All right. If you have to go, it was lovely to see you. I had dinner.
Yeah.
It's like almost 10 here. I had awesome pad thai. Very yummy. But a while
want it.
ago.
I
Yeah.
want it. I
It's
want
really
it. now.
good. It's really good. It's one of the nice things about about living in a city like Berlin
You can get everything.
is, even though it's fucking Germany, which generally has horrible ethnic food, Berlin has a lot of immigrants, so you get lots of really good ethnic food. So
See, I
one
had
of the
very,
nice things
very
about being
German
here.
food. I had Maultaschen, which I don't even know how to
Maultaschen.
explain.
Maultaschen are basically raviolis, but really big.
Yeah. Invented by German monks because they wanted to eat meat on Fridays, and they figured that if we put the meat inside the pasta dough, then God won't see it and we can get away with it, which is how religion works.
So I know
That's
I
where
know we're gonna be
Maultaschen came from.
Yeah. Which is why in Swabia they're called Herrgottsbescheißerle.
I know we're gonna be delaying certain sprints, but did you say Habentaschen?
Maultaschen.
Maultaschen.
Okay.
Which
it
literally
related
means
to
mouth
the
mouth
Jewish-
bags.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it related to the Jewish treat? I'm pretty sure it's called Habentaschen.
I don't think it's related to that, but I mean the word Taschen is the same because it just means bags, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rel-
Maul
Religion's
is
weird sometimes. Like you can't eat
Mouth.
certain things, or you can't drink certain things. I've been hanging out with Mormons. They can't like drink caffeine. You know?
Well, no, that's only if you're like, I mean, just like with any religion, if you're, it depends on how
Strict.
much you want to follow the stuff. But anyways,
Yeah.
let's read.
Let's read. Don't
Yeah.
forget to mute yourself. See you soon.
Buenas tardes.
Hello.
Yes, that soothing voice. Power Dog's pretty good so far. I'm digging it a lot.
Yeah.
I think you'd like it, Raph. It's very angry and political already.
It may come as a surprise, but I don't necessarily just choose books for being, angry and political. 'Cause I can do that on my own.
But I
Yeah.
know those books appeal to you, Raph. That's why I'm telling you this.
Okay. Yeah, I might give it a try at some point.
I think I'm going to call it.
All right.
All
It's
right.
10:30 here. That's late enough. It's good to see both of you again. It's good to see everybody in the chat. Good to read with you all a bit.
Always fun hanging out.
Like Daniel, that was like a very, very mean comment right there. Why are you still on Twitter, though?
Hey, Tim. I actually talked to him on my podcast not too long ago. It's probably going to go up.
Not just like the comment on the immigrants in Berlin. I just had to not just leave it staying there in the void.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what comments he's been talking about, but the blue checks never seem to mention the food. Yeah. There's really good food in Berlin. It's one of the things in the times that I have lived in small towns. They've always made me miss big towns because I've mostly lived in big cities, and big cities, of course, you've got a big concentration of people from all over the place, and you get all sorts of food, and the quality is usually really good, and like I can get amazing food delivered to my flat here.
That's awesome. I went like to visit not to visit, like with on a friend's birthday thing yesterday, and he invited us to like a Japanese restaurant. I've never been to like a Japanese restaurant, not like a sushi place, but like Japanese food beyond sushi. And I'm like,
right.
I felt like an even more ignorant barbarian than I usually feel like.
See, that's the place where I've probably got you beat.
Yeah, very much.
Because I've lived in Sydney and Washington D.C. and Berlin and London and whatever, so I'm used to all that stuff, and I really miss it when it's gone.
Yeah, I can imagine that. It's like for me, it's more like I've also like lived like a poor student all my life, so like there's certain limits to the stuff of the kind of food I'm aware of. Right? It's like
I lived like a poor student when I was a poor student.
Yeah,
but I consider myself lucky that the things that I actually was genuinely interested in turned out to be quite lucrative. So I've been earning okay money for a while.
Yeah.
I'm quite fond of suburbia, so.
Daniel's been seeing explicit fascist rhetoric a lot on Twitter. Not everyone gets it because they dog whistle a lot, but constantly complaining about immigrants taking over as major theme. See, I apparently follow the right people or don't follow the wrong people on Twitter.
I mean, that's what Daniel said. Like, the people with like, the blue check marks are definitely like blue check marks are red flags, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know some people who have blue check marks who are
Tim has a
certainly not
check
assholes,
mark.
but
he's a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, there's different reasons for people to get a blue check mark, but
like the people that had blue check marks before like Elon took it over, and you can just like buy a blue check mark. Those people are obviously not assholes, but like people that buy the blue check marks are often somewhat suspect in their motivations.
Yeah, I mean, some of them just are famous people who want to be actually recognizably themselves. Like I think Neil Gaiman has a blue check mark, for example. But yeah.
Okay.
But Daniel, it's all the wonderful Neom ads.
See, Daniel, I mean, one of the things they put in, which I was quite happy about, which I think wasn't there after Mr. X. I still call it Twitter, and I call him X. So Mr. X put this back or added it that you've got your normal feed, but you've also got following feed. And the
Yeah.
following feed only shows you, I mean, it shows you ads, of course, but it only shows you people you're actually following.
Yeah.
And that makes me happy because I've been on Twitter since like the year after it started. So I've been through all the phases. Back in the beginning, it was nerds like me.
Yeah.
And it was fun
It
and
was
funny
basically
and
Will
new and
Wheaton, Neil
exciting.
Gaiman, and Felicia Day, and whoever else.
Even before that, like
I remember those were
in the
like
very
the three
beginning,
people that you got suggested, like if you signed on in like
yeah,
28 or
in
something.
in
Hey,
the beginning,
Yeah.
like if you didn't work in IT, you probably weren't on Twitter, like because it just wasn't. Nobody knew about it. It wasn't a mass phenomenon yet, you know.
yeah, it was like
and-
being on Twitter was like finding out what William Gibson was reading this week, which was great.
yeah, exactly. And it was a much quieter, easier place to be on. And then I was following everybody and getting angry about half of what I saw on there. And then I curated my feed. And now, and I have different accounts anyway. And my Madam Books account is basically just book people, booktubers, people who are fans of my channel, people who are authors, whatever. And that doesn't make me angry very often. It's nice.
I just don't have the energy for social media these days. It's like I go on there, and maybe it's partly because of like trying to go through like any social media platform with a screen reader is absolutely fucking annoying. But it's like,
yeah.
I
can
go through
imagine.
it like for like 5 minutes. I'm like, fuck it, not my
Yeah.
thing. We're done.
Yeah, to be honest, I spend extremely little time on Twitter. I look at it once every few days for like 10 minutes. So, yeah.
Ida, forests are annoying. They're full of raccoons and boars and owls. I fucking hate owls. Like, I live next.
Why
I
do
live-
you hate owls?
You hate owls.
like the
It's
forest.
a pretty
starts-
fucking random thing to hate,
like the
especially if
forest
you're
is, like,
blind. I mean, like,
the forest is like right next to my house, right? Like 100,
okay, so they're
150
loud.
meters. And I wake up in the middle of the night because there's owls doing the owl thing all night long.
Whatever
They're
you do, don't move to Australia, because one of the constant memories from my childhood is cockatoos, like the white sulfur crested
I know
cockatoos,
them.
white with the yellow crest. Fucking cockatoos, like 200 to 500 of them inhabiting a tree. Like they just take over entire trees. You look outside and the tree is completely white. And what they like to do is scream. And they don't have pretty voices. They are not nice singing birds. They scream.
Yeah, but do that
And they
like
start
in the middle
doing
of the
that.
night.
They start doing it at about 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah, that's like when all the birds do like stuff.
Oh no.
I have a colony of crows outside of my window, and they're like very, very loud crows. But like in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
it's like 3 a.m., like 1 a.m. You have the owl like ooh, ooh, and I'm like, fuck you, owl, go die.
Fuck you. Right?
And with those immortal words, fuck you, go die. I'm gonna call it for this week. I hope everybody had fun listening to Raph rant about owls and chatting and reading. I hope you had a good week. I hope you have a lovely week coming up. And I'll see you next Sunday in the pub.
Yeah.
Take it easy.
Cheers.